You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Wayne Walker is one of two Albany ward councillors in Auckland. We've often caught up for a few chinwags on the beaches of Whangaparoa, but it's been a while since I chatted with him, so let's see what he thinks about Auckland's transport woes and congestion charging. He joins me now. Welcome to The Crunch, Wayne. Pleased to have you on board.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Now, Wayne, you're one of the two Albany councillors that look after an area basically from Campbell's Bay all the way up the coast, including Whangaparoa up to Waiwera. Isn't that right?
That's right, and there are two local board areas. The one that runs up the coast, that's Hibiscus and Bays, and then the other local board area is Upper Harbour, which runs from East Coast Road all the way almost to the Northwestern Motorway. Yep. So that takes in the Albany Basin, Otiha Valley Road, Constellation Drive, Paramarama, Green Heights.
It's a huge area that you have to look after.
West Harbour. It's a big area, well over 200,000 population, more than that actually, probably 220, 230. So, yeah, a big area. Of course, when you're elected as a councillor, you're elected as a regional councillor.
Yes.
So, of course, you take a particular interest in your ward, but you're making decisions and you're committed to Auckland as a whole.
Yeah, and your area that you're responsible for has got huge amounts of development happening there, and the last government committed to finally building that bridge that's going to give better access to Whangaparoa Peninsula. That's a long time coming, isn't it?
That's correct. I mean, the main driver for it was reducing congestion through Silverdale, because Silverdale's become a real bottleneck. The cars that go to Whangaparoa from the city, they have to travel through Silverdale. Obviously, you've got the cars coming from Silverdale itself, Rewa and Red Beach,
yeah,
and you've got cars going east and west. So the idea of Penlink increasingly is it helps to take some of that congestion off that point. And you're right, there are big developments. You've had Millwater, and now there's Milldale over the other side of the motorway, which is going to have quite some thousands of homes.
I used to live in your area, and every now and then we'd catch up on Arkles Bay and have a bit of a chinwag about various issues and things like that. So
lovely spot.
We've always had a convivial relationship, haven't we, even though I can be confrontational sometimes. But I've always found you very easy to talk to and totally approachable. But there's some issues that Whangaparoa in particular has, isn't there? I mean, we had the super city. We were supposed to have a homogenised rates and all of those things. But rubbish collection's still a bugbear for many of the residents around there.
That's right. Having said that, that's largely been made the same across the region. We've had the recent rollout of the food scrap bins that I certainly have some issues over. I would have preferred it to be optional so that if you don't want to use it, you don't have to pay for it. In my particular case, I have something called a hungry bin, which is a form of worm farm. It's incredibly efficient, and that's far better for the council than me putting some food scraps out, having them picked up in a vehicle with the consequent emissions, trucked all the way down to Reparoa, put through some form of digestion system, and then the trucks come back to Auckland. So I save the council a bit of money and do a better job. And
that's the thing. I talked to Ken Turner about that, and he's got a real bugbear about that whole food scraps thing. And, I don't live up that way now. I mean, I live in an apartment building in Takapuna, and the food scraps bins just won't work in apartments.
That is correct. Well, I guess the good news is that you won't be paying for that service if you're in an apartment. That's my understanding.
Well, I've got a waste disposal as well, so I'm not really totally green like you with worm farming and those sorts of things, but each to their own, I say.
Sure, that's right.
Now, you mentioned about the congestion, and, I used to travel up and down through Silverdale, getting onto the motorway, getting home, the long tail that would be from the Silverdale off-ramp all the way back to past Otiha Valley every night. From about 3:30 to onwards. In the morning, you would start hitting the tail around Otiha. The transit, or Waka Kotahi, or whatever they call themselves now, spent an inordinate amount of time in about 6 years developing, extending the busway to Otiha Valley, and at the same time creating about 2.5 kilometres of 5 lanes either side. But it's kind of like not joined up thinking, and we've got a situation where you've got 2 lanes feeding into 5, which then feed into 2, and the reverse going north exactly the same. All they seem to have done is move the congestion that caused about 2.5 kilometres closer to Auckland City.
Sure, that's right. And they recognise that from the outset. So when I've inquired, they've said, look, we expect things to be just as congested. What it has done, though, is it does make it easier to get onto the Upper Harbour Highway.
Absolutely.
Because you've got a series of flyovers, and that's got to be a better thing. Of course, that takes you over to the Northwestern Motorway, which is, if not more congested.
It's okay until you get to Henderson, and then you hit the congestion, so you're stuffed either way.
Henderson is diabolical, and I don't think that there's any simple solution there. There's a busway that's going into play, and that will make some difference. And certainly the Northern Busway has been hugely successful. I was on the steering committee that worked on that for a number of years. It's exceeded expectations, and that's certainly been great.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the busway was a good idea, taking the buses off the motorway. But again, when they extended it a little bit or changed it around, especially at Silverdale, they built a car park at Silverdale, and then almost immediately after it opened, they then had to extend it and then do it all again. It seems like there was 2 or 3 goes at trying to get the car parking right. And even now, if you drive past the car parking at Silverdale and certainly at Otiha Valley, every car park's taken. So it's like they've only done a half-assed job on the parking. Why didn't they build a multi-level car park building to cater for it? Because they're going to have to do something like that eventually.
Well, I was a Rodney District Councillor before I was an Auckland Councillor, and most of the other Rodney District Councillors, they weren't at all interested in buses and the like. I was pretty much a lone voice. And I tried to get the then council to buy a much larger area of land for the park and ride, as they could have bought much more for actually very little extra extra cost. But they wouldn't do it. I don't know what the reason for that is. There weren't adequate reasons given, because I said to them, look, if you buy the extra land and you don't need it, it's going to be worth a lot of money. You could sell it and basically, fund the entire park and ride. But I didn't have support, so that didn't happen. So you're absolutely right. The park and ride at Silverdale is at capacity. It spills over into the Silverdale rugby parking over the road and further along. And that situation is going to keep growing, because getting to the park and ride on a feeder bus takes a long, long time.
Yeah.
So if you're on Whangapara, over in Orea and the like, and you want a quicker trip into town, you either get dropped off at the park and ride, or you drive there and park up, and then you're on a fast service into the city, which is what people want. They want something that's fast, they want it convenient, and they want it easy. And the park and ride at Silverdale is very successful, and so is the one at Otiha Valley Road, which is the biggest one.
And that's at capacity too now.
It's been at capacity for some time, so people park along at a reserve called Hooton Reserve. Yep. Unfortunately, there's very poor biking and walking facilities, particularly biking, to get from the park and ride to where you want to park. So one of the things that I'd like to see happen is that Auckland Transport get behind much more of these e-bike facilities.
Yeah.
So you can pick up an e-bike somewhere in the vicinity and get to the park and ride quickly. That would enlarge the catchment of the park and ride. That's got to happen.
The biggest problem that I see with public transport, And in 2010, I was campaigning against you, but we had a bit of fun on the at the public meetings and things like that. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting to win. I just wanted to get rid of the clown from Campbell's Bay, and we succeeded in doing that. But the one thing that I found amazing was every public meeting we went to, there was always talk about improving public transport. And I used to facetiously say, everybody says they want better public transport, but no one's prepared to ride on it. It's something that they want for everybody else. And then somebody described to me the other day that public transport tends to have a definition that is a slow and expensive way of traveling from not where you are to not where you want to be at a time that doesn't suit you in the company of people you'd never let into your home. And I don't know how we can ever address that because it's kind of funny.
Sure. And unfortunately, there are forms of public transport like the Gulf Harbour ferry service that does take people from Whangapara into the city where they want to go. It is convenient. It is faster than using the bus. But the ferry service has been run down to the point where there's only one peak service in the morning, city-bound, and one coming back in the evening. And that's a campaign that myself and my fellow councillor John Watson have been putting a lot of effort into to get the ferry service up and running again. But we're striking any amount of opposition from Auckland Transport, who seem to be very reluctant, and are now talking about eliminating the service completely in the upcoming long-term plan process, which you can imagine is incredibly upsetting for the people in Whangapara and the Hibiscus Coast, because the biggest number of submissions to the recent regional public transport plan, I think well over 40% of them, were on the Gulf Harbour ferry service.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very popular service, and it's extremely well received by, I've had lots of people we're friends with up that way that would always take the ferry in to town. It arrives at the bottom of town where they want to be and all of those sorts of things. But, you've actually hit on something that's kind of been annoying me, is that almost all of the problems that we have around congestion, around public transport, around these sorts of things, almost always come back to the responsibility of Auckland Transport. And, we had last week, the media announced that Auckland Council is now going to deploy congestion charging. Of course, what the media didn't say is you're actually not doing that. You're going to investigate congestion charging. I wrote an article saying that this is an important thing. We need to actually have some discussion with us on because it seems that Auckland Transport has actually contributed in many ways to increasing congestion by pushing for bike lanes, by reducing road surfaces. We've got a situation where they're creating these bike lanes in some places, and street sweepers can't clear the detritus that occurs, in the gutters and things like that. And this is where the cyclists have to go, meaning that they don't actually use it. They now cycle on the road. So the road surface is reduced for vehicles and the cyclists don't use the things that they're using. Then we've got, these traffic lights at the on-ramps which hold everything up. And the latest manifestation of craziness is these raised almost judder bars for pedestrian crossings at a cost of something like, I've heard, $450,000 per one. In Takapuna, there's three of them.
Sure, and they're going to be signalised. I drove along that road today, and it was off peak. It was okay, but peak time, you'll just be bumper to bumper if the cars are slowed down even further. The other problem with those raised crossings, and we're experiencing it in a number of locations around Auckland, is it means that when you have a storm event and you have a lot of rain, and the road becomes an overland flow path, it actually causes flooding. And this has happened with shops in Devonport. It happens around the bays where you've got locations like Browns Bay and other areas where you've got shops where the floor of the shop is near enough the level of the footpath, okay? And that's not always a bad thing because, you want people and disabled people to be able to get around easily. But it means that if the drainage doesn't work and the drainage on the road doesn't work, you can get some very bad flooding. And I know that the Devonport Business Association were taking Auckland Transport to court, I think, because, yes, they did, because some of these raised crossings had not been thought through. And Auckland Transport has now had to back down because of that. And that's just over the flooding issue. And certainly you're right. In a number of instances, it's highly questionable whether you need something when there are other things that could happen. I'll give you another example. There's a proposal to put a number of these raised crossings in Browns Bay.
Yep.
And the reason is for safety improvements and the like. Of course, often there aren't actually any records of accidents, but nevertheless these crossings are still going to be put in because they're heavily subsidised by Waku Kotahi, NZTA, public money. But if you take a location like Browns Bay in the flat part of Browns Bay where the shops are and the like, that whole area could be made a lower speed zone.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen anyway. Once you've got lower speeds, you have far less accidents, okay? So you don't necessarily need to put all these raised crossings in when there are other more effective, far more economical solutions. And in some of these areas, the cars aren't often travelling more than 30 k's an hour anyway,
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is that who asked for these? Like if you talk to local residents and you say, who asked for these pedestrian crossings to be done this way? Who asked for, take Takapuna and Hurstmere Road, pedestrianising parts of Takapuna Road and creating Hurstmere Road and creating a cycleway that goes both ways up one side that you never see a bike on? Who asked for this stuff?
That's right.
And the answer is almost nobody asked for these things. And AT has gone about spending vast sums of ratepayers' money on solutions for problems that don't exist. And then...
That is correct.
And
if I can just add something...
Sure. Go ahead.
Sure. If I can just make a comment, what myself and I think many people in the community have an issue with is there are often many other opportunities where very modest amounts of money are needed to make a change. For example, Otiha Valley Road, okay?
Yep.
You've got the busway there, you've got the tennis centre, you've got a big shopping complex and a big stadium that Parta Council has put up a proposal to demolish, and there's a huge campaign against that. But anyway, let's just put that to one side. What we need to do with Otiha Valley Road is simply widen some of the existing footpaths so you can cycle off-road on a shared footpath cycleway at very modest cost. But we simply can't get that to happen because all the money's been spent on what I call gold-plated solutions that, as you've identified, sometimes there aren't too many people using.
Well, they didn't ask for them, they don't use them, and we've spent millions and millions of dollars, and the net result in many of these areas where these things have gone in is we've caused congestion, and then we have the mayor suggesting we need to bring in congestion charging. And I'm sitting here shaking my head and saying, hang on a second.
Sure.
We elected Wayne Brown to give AT the bash because we're frustrated with their intransigence and their seemingly unwillingness to actually provide traffic solutions. And what we're getting is, we need to pay for the congestion that they've caused.
Sure, and that's against a background where the alternatives just aren't there. So, as you point out, you're bashing people. You're trying to encourage them to take an alternative. That might be public transport, but if public transport doesn't get them where they want to go, when they want to go, conveniently, that doesn't work.
No.
And I guess the other thing, and it's the thing that really worries me, and it's the problem that we've seen where sometimes quite a bit of parking is being removed for dedicated cycleways and these raised tables and the like, is you haven't got often the parking that's needed for the survival of local businesses, particularly if you've got a dairy or something and you know, people need to be able to pull up, pop in, get something, and then they're on their way.
Yeah.
So the consequence is that businesses shut down. You don't have the ability to shop local. You then got to travel further afield to get what you want. It just makes congestion worse. We need communities that are human scale, that have got as many local facilities as possible close to where you live, so that you don't have to make such a long trip. But we seem to be making it very difficult for businesses to stay alive, and it's tough out there, very tough.
Yeah, I mean, it is very tough. Have noticed a lot of the developments around, you end up with endless traffic cones, traffic management. You never know whether you can go down a road or not. In the end, you just go, you know what, I'll just shop online. And that's no good for the stores and the store owners, and it's no good for the areas that have those things, and it just dies and dies and dies, and we end up all sitting in our apartments or our houses doing everything on Zoom and buying everything online, and we don't end up with any interaction with people.
Sure, that's right. The cone situation seems to be over the top. Far more cones than you would think practically are necessary, often lights and the like. I experienced a situation just this last week where, you know, all of a sudden you're confronted with these cones. There's no signage further back causing you to detour so you can get around it, when, you know, quite often that's practical. So people get stuck in these things, and it causes huge disruption. Sometimes you've just got a very minor job, and associated with that job you can have multiple roads in the vicinity, especially when the work's in the vicinity of an intersection, you know, causing delays. And where are the checklists? You know, I just don't know. One of the things that a number of councillors are asking for is exactly what is the pricing, what is the charging around these cones? Do we pay per cone? How does it work? We need to get that information because, as you've pointed out, it's costing a huge amount of money to even small jobs.
Yeah, I mean, each one of those cones costs about $200.
That's right. They're expensive.
Yeah, and someone's got to pay for it, and if it's the contractors, they're going to pass that on to the council. And it's the ratepayers that end up with it. But you're right, though. There's a lot of roadworks and things like they recently. I mean, I was astonished to see this actually around Takapuna, just around the corner from me. They were doing roadworks, and it's a main feeder road in towards the motorway, and they actually did all the work at night. And I've never seen that before, which is fantastic. But hey, why don't we do that on other things, on other streets, instead of all these busy roads getting torn up?
Sure. I mean, probably the best project that I can recall when they've done a lot of the work at night was the Northern Corridor improvements in the vicinity of Constellation Drive and so on. Okay?
Yeah.
And Waka Kotahi, NZTA, to their credit, organised the project, so there was a significant amount of work done at night. And yes, if you were coming home later, you'd have to do a detour and so on.
Yeah.
But that was far preferable to having significant delays, and they would have been huge delays during the day, so hats off to them.
Yeah, I mean, Barry's Point Road was completely relayed in about 3 days, and that was because they did it at night. You know, but you've seen plenty of other roadworks, and a case in point is the expansion of the motorway between Otiha Valley and Constellation, where it took 5 years. And of course, we had COVID in the middle of that, where we had the stupid government saying that these guys who were working outside by themselves on a roller and a grader had to stay at home. So it just delayed everything, just absolute craziness that was going on. But I mean, that was a classic one where they could have worked at night on some, especially the stuff that's not actually on the road, the expansion works and all of those. But it comes back, doesn't it, to AT? And this is why I was flummoxed by Wayne Brown's supposition that somehow we can charge people to be on the motorway in the congested areas. Is he not aware that he doesn't own those roads?
Sure. Having said that, and we don't know precisely how it would work, but it's a matter of where you put the cameras that pick people up. We don't know what the case is, but there's talk about putting them on on various off-ramps and on-ramps. And I guess the question is, well, who owns the off-ramps and on-ramps? Where's the demarcation line between NZTA and the council? I think one of the things that's motivating some people on the council is to try to get some money to offset the loss of the regional fuel tax that the government is talking about.
Well,
but
they've been stealing
this congestion charge is not going to be in time for that anyway,
No. Well, I mean, that's the thing, that the regional fuel tax has been scalped out of Aucklanders for 6 years by the previous government. God knows where that money's gone, but Aucklanders have paid for it. It was ostensibly supposed to pay for the folly of, light rail to the airport, which, again, we don't need. The Northern Busway is the answer for dealing with the airport. But where's all that money gone? And is that going to come back into Auckland? And then if you look at the congestion in the places they're talking about, like from Ellerslie, Panmure, that roundabout there through to Green Lane and then on into the city, almost all of those places when you are getting onto the motorway to head north into the city, the on-ramps are the world's shortest on-ramps, which is what's actually causing the congestion, is inappropriate design work on the actual motorways. And then they've got those stupid lights, which I just ignore anyway because the police can't prosecute you if you go through those red lights. They aren't even allowed to stop you for it. And those are causing congestion that back up onto the suburban roads all around those areas. Right. And now, because of those things, the short on-ramps, the lights, of course there's the traffic, and the road design all around there, we've got congestion. And now it seems that we want to charge the long-suffering ratepayers even more money. And there's some question over whether or not it would succeed, because if I know anything about human nature, is if there's going to be a tax for using that part of the motorway, most people will go, I'll go round that. And so all you've done is move the congestion from the motorway into the suburban streets now.
That is correct. And the other thing that will happen is if you're trying to get more cars off the road at peak time, yes, you may get some cars off the road at peak time, but then you just spread the peak. So the peak goes for longer. And Auckland Transport is well familiar with a concept called induced traffic. What that means is, in very simple terms, when you build roads, they fill up with cars, okay?
Yep.
So if you actually make the congestion on the road less at a certain time, it'll fill up. More people will use it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me putting in place a penalty to change behaviour, and the cost of running that penalty is really expensive because you've got to have these cameras and a whole system.
Yep.
It ain't cheap. The cost of the collection for the Northern Tollway, the section through the tunnels and the like at the time, was relatively expensive compared to what they were getting. If you want to alter somebody's behaviour, you're much better to try and use incentives to change that behaviour than penalties. And people respond to incentives. If I were to say to you, Cameron, I'll shout you a cup of coffee if you change your behaviour in a particular way, there's something that triggers off in your mind, and you'll think pretty seriously about that, And the beauty of incentives is it's much more of a voluntary-based system, okay? So, for example, if we accept that the idea of the congestion charging is to get people off cars at peak and the like, one of the things that's going to be really important to them is if they've got, say, flexible working hours, if their employer gives them incentives around that, if they can work from home, there may be some form of incentive for parking at a better time. Those sorts of things really work. What they need often is something called travel planning. So if you've got a big operation, a big company or the like, or you've got a number of employees, you actually put together a plan so that they're aware of how they can travel more efficiently, possibly using public transport or other means or car sharing. You might even put together some form of car share proposition for your employees and the like, and you might even incentivize it, you might give them an incentive to take public transport by buying them a hop card with some money on it or the like, if that was going to save you on parking if you're a business, because the cost of parking is great. But the point I'm making is it's voluntary, it works, it's not clubbing people with an expense, and bear in mind that you've got a lot of people who can't alter the time that they work. They may not be well off. They're going to be hit severely by this tax. It's really not fair for people that don't have an option. Imagine if you've got, 2 or 3 jobs that you're holding down, or you're a tradie or the like, and you've got to get around. You've got a real problem because you're going to be hit with this, and you're going to have to load it on to whoever's paying your bills.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Because human nature being what it is, if you're going to put on a tax, you may change people's behavior, but more than likely you won't, because they still have to get from A to B. And even at peak hours, that's the best way to do it. But you also run the risk with the penalties that businesses move out of the CBD. Businesses move; they're already moving out of there, and you go to, which is great for communities in, like Takapuna or Albany or Whangapara, where you've got more people living in and working in particular areas. But there's a vast number of people that can't do that. And so they're going to pay the tax, and it's not going to reduce the congestion because people still have to get about, and it's the easiest way to do it. And so then not only do you have the taxes and the huge cost that goes there, and now you have to use your idea of some sort of subsidy or reward system, and the cost goes up for no benefit.
And if we take the Central City area, and there was a good article by Viv Beck, she's the chief executive of Heart of the City,
yes,
just explaining the issues that we've got in the city with short stay parking, and the particular problem if the downtown car park's gone. There's a whole lot of people, especially people from outside of the city, that depend on that car park to get in. They might be coming in for a meal or go to the movie or some form of function or the like. And they're not going to be able to do that because parking in the Central City area is getting tougher and tougher. And I guess what I would say is if you've got that car coming in, and it's got a number of people in it, it's actually pretty efficient.
Yeah.
And if the car is an electric car and it's got a number of people in it, it may well be adding far less emissions than a bus, especially if it's a diesel bus. So cars aren't all bad. It's a matter of how we use them, encouraging more people to share, to use the cars at the right time and use them as efficiently as we can. So one of my huge concerns is the impact of all of these things that have happened. The cones, the CRL work in the central city, the work that have been done on Queen Street and the like, and the impact on businesses that are the lifeblood of the city. You know, the businesses, the people that work there. It's getting incredibly tough.
Yeah.
The people that pay rates, the people that pay tax.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like AT hates ratepayers. And they're going to do anything they can because they have this doctrinaire attitude that they know best. And, you know, we've just picked apart congestion charging in about 15 minutes. And yet we're going to spend millions of dollars, presumably, studying this for the next couple of years so that we can get an answer that says, oh, it's too hard. But we already know that.
And I guess one of the things I'd say is that we're also going to be out of step with technology. And what do I mean by that? One of the problems that the government has got is its revenue, the money that it collects from cars by way of the tax on petrol, is going to go down as more and more people buy electric vehicles.
Yep.
And there's an electric vehicle revolution happening, okay?
Yep.
But the government doesn't get any money out of the electric vehicle because it doesn't use any fuel, okay?
So they need to find a way to do that. So they will find a way to do that because governments are rapacious and they always need other people.
That's right. So what's likely is we will have some form of charging regime for cars, for electric cars, based on the kilometres that you travel, okay?
Yeah, like road user charges.
And the government's, and other cities are already, doing this. So the government is going to have to put the technology together to do this. That has to happen sometime in the not-too-distant future. Why wouldn't you wait for that and actually get your act together rather than bringing in some other form of scheme that'll be superseded by that technology? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, and you're right. And just in terms of technology, most public transport solutions in Auckland seem to be around buses. And if you look at any time, outside of peak hours, there's these enormous buses that are driving around, often with
ghost buses.
Yeah, just with the driver in it, fulfilling a contractual obligation to have a bus roll down a road at a particular time. But there's nobody actually using it. It's a little bit like cycleways, right? And they've got all these cycleways everywhere, and there's no quantification of how many people use it. And the old build it and they'll come argument never works. And
that is right.
Yeah, the proof of that is the car park at Tokapuia, at Takapuna, that they put all this racks in for people with electric bikes and stuff, and it's not used by anybody, but at vast expense. And so we've got ghost buses that are driving around. Yet if I just make a comment there, the car park that has been well used, which is where the market used to be, has been impacted on significantly. I know.
That should have stayed. It would have enabled the market to stay. That's deeply disappointing to a lot of Takapuna and North Shore people.
Yeah. And so, again, it's something that we didn't ask for. That's a solution for a problem that doesn't exist at vast expense. And the point I was making about technology is not in the not too distant future, we're going to have the technology for driverless cars and driverless buses. It's already happening in large cities in China where they've got the scale to do it. But it will become cheaper and more available and all of that. We could be looking at having a larger fleet of smaller buses, if not vans, to cater for the smaller amounts of people during the day, instead of these enormous diesel-sucking buses that are driving around that are empty.
You're absolutely right, and you're certainly right around the technology. Tesla are the company that are leading that. They've got one of the largest computers on the planet that's receiving information from most of the existing Teslas that are on the road. and they're all feeding into this giant neural net, it's called, that's very intelligent learning technology. Their cars, certainly all the recent cars, and going back some years now, are all equipped with the cameras and the like, so that they can have what's called full self-drive. And what is that? It means that the driver doesn't drive. The car drives itself, takes you to where you want, and it's safer. It's far better than a human driver because it's got 360-degree vision. It can respond.
Yep.
Unfortunately, some of the self-drive options that are operating aren't so good, but the Tesla version, which is coming, and may start rolling out within a year, certainly within the next 2 years, will make a quantum change. And if you add to that the new vehicle that they're working on, that they reckon will come in at around $25,000 US.
Yeah.
That will revolutionize electric vehicles, and it will mean that if they employ something called their robo-taxi technology, which is where that car that you own is available for other people to use when you're not, you could be in the money, in the sense that the car's actually not costing you money, it's making money.
Well, that's
so we've
right.
got more efficient cars on the road, and if those cars or small vans, as you point out, are full of people and they're operating on demand, it's far more efficient than a ghost bus that's driving around with hardly people, if anybody in it, apart from the driver. Doesn't make sense.
The other thing with the technology too is that these vehicles can drive very close to each other because they react far faster than a human can to anything. And
That's right.
So you can get more on the road to that. And the key important thing here about that solution is that you can step out onto any street and summon a vehicle from where you live or just outside of where you live, get into this vehicle that will drive you there, allowing you to do things on the way, which you can't do if you're driving because you've got to concentrate on driving, and then take you exactly to where you want to go, which public transport never does, unless you have an office,
Correct.
At the train station or the bus station, right? So it picks you up from where you want to be picked up from. It takes you to where you want to go, and then it disappears and goes off and services another customer.
And what you can add to that is it's very cheap. So the huge concern that I've got is that this is actually happening. The technology is here now. Companies like Tesla are in the process of building the cars, building the system. It is not going to cost the council money because it's private individuals that will make the choice based on cost because it's cheaper to buy into this.
Yep.
But what it does mean is the huge amount of money, and it is a vast sum of money that we're spending on various forms of public transport, may be high and dry.
Exactly.
It'll just be dodo technology.
Especially if we're talking about light rail or rail to the airport and things like that. Imagine if you had a dedicated, let's call it a busway because it's easy to call it that. A dedicated busway that's also available for autonomous cars. Imagine that.
That is correct. And if we talk about that form of busway, these buses can operate on a digital busway. Okay? So you don't even need the rails in the ground. That's a concept called, say, a trackless tram.
Yep.
So they know where to go, okay, because they can operate off GIS, global positioning and so on, and conceivably some current device in the road. I mean, that's the way that technology has moved, which means that something that's stuck and fixed, like a light rail system, which is hugely expensive, may well be completely unnecessary
and
a big waste of money.
And here's the next thing. If there's something goes wrong on the line, that train or light rail system or trolley bus or whatever can't go anywhere, right? It is stuck.
That's right.
Whereas a vehicle
I know.
that operates on the road,
I've been stuck in one.
Yeah,
that's right. I've been stuck in I was stuck in a tram in Melbourne once because there was an accident and the tram stopped and everything on that particular line, all the trams stopped.
Yep.
Okay. Whereas if you've got something that's more flexible, that doesn't happen. And as you point out, other vehicles can make use of the space.
And then, if there is something on the digital busway that causes a problem, well, that can reroute that onto ordinary roads around that and service carries on. So,
sure, that's right.
It seems that we have this Alice in Wonderland behavior in government departments and in AT to build fanciful, expensive solutions based on old technology that'll be superseded faster than we can build it.
Sure, and the particular concern I've got is when I'm in council meetings, I raise these issues. So I've said to Auckland Transport when they were bringing up this time of use congestion charging, I've raised it over light rail, I've raised it over the expenditure in buses and the like, and I've said to them, have you modelled what's happening? Have you modelled the change in technology around these new electric vehicles that have got the ability to drive themselves? What does this mean? What does it mean? How does it affect your investments? Have you taken this into consideration? And the answer is no, it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
So that's a huge concern because we're talking about really big sums of money. And you would know that if there's one thing we're short of right now, we're short of money. Watercare is hitting us up for very large sums of money for projects, and transport is hitting us up for huge sums of money, in the hundreds of millions. We've got big bills from the storms. Our Healthy Waters Department has got to spend money upgrading stormwater. And these are huge sums of money that our council doesn't have, and the only place that we can go is government to get some money to tide us over and look after us.
And they don't have it either.
And they don't have it either. So we've got a major problem right now.
I think technology is the solution in whatever form. And the way you can do that is either two ways. You can go and spend on technology yourself, or you can create an environment that supports technology that welcomes companies here to use New Zealand or Auckland, in this case, as a test bed.
Or do both.
Or do both. Yeah, but I'm really opposed to...
And certainly, sure, and certainly, if I can pick up on that, I've said to Auckland Transport, look, why wouldn't you reach out to Tesla?
Exactly.
They'll come and they will outline what you can do, okay? They'll also outline how to solve the energy problems because they've got these big, giga battery packs and the like that they can put in so that as you electrify the buses and as you electrify the cars, you've got these batteries that have taken advantage of the power that's available off-peak to help charge things at peak. Now, they've certainly got the computers and the capacity to model those sorts of things and provide those sorts of solutions. So why aren't we reaching out to companies like that to give us some suggestions? And that may not cost us any money at all.
No, it might not cost us anything other than changing the regulatory environment, which is some legislation or some bylaws or whatever. That's easy and cheap to do. It's a whole lot cheaper than building rail lines and tunnels all the way to the airport when no one's going to use it. No one has ever done anything like that successfully in the world ever. But we always seem to think that we can do it better than everywhere else.
Sure. And you're right that Auckland and New Zealand is a good test bed for doing stuff. Particularly if you're a tech company and you want to try something out. So we should be saying to them, look, let's do this. I've been taking a lot of interest in electrification, especially with the Gulf Harbour ferry service, because the government's pumped some money into Auckland Transport to build some electric ferries. But I was told that you couldn't run an electric ferry out to Gulf Harbour. But lo and behold, myself and other people got in touch with a company that's running an electric ferry now down in Wellington. It's running successfully. It's been more successful than what they figured. And we got those people up. They checked out the Gulf Harbour route, and they've told Auckland Transport, yes, you can run an electric ferry. It can fast charge either end.
Yep.
It works. And it can operate on foiling technology, so that lifts it up above the water.
Yep.
So it's
reduces
more
consumption.
Efficient.
Yep.
Yeah, and of course it would offer a quicker trip than the current 50 minutes, and you could get down to 40 minutes. That means that the ferry has got a quicker turnaround, so you get a bit of return on the asset.
Yes.
And of course, as soon as people can get a 40-minute trip rather than a 50-minute trip, a lot more people are going to use it.
Well,
and all of a sudden,
cheaper and faster than the car.
Sure. And the particular thing about, say, taking a ferry like I'm suggesting is, unlike a bus or a train, you can work on the ferry. You know, you can have a chat to your friends, you can have a cup of coffee, you can have a meeting if you want with some other people, you can use your laptop. So your productivity is improved an awful lot. Yet Auckland Transport at this point are looking to cancel that service altogether, which is fundamentally unfair. And that is not something that they're planning to do for any other comparable ferry route in Auckland. So we've had thousands of people submit through the Regional Public Transport Plan in good faith, many of them on the Gulf Harbour ferry service.
Yeah.
These people know that the ferry service can operate better, that in the medium to long term we can have electric ferries operating, which is what they're doing elsewhere. But for some reason, they're singling out Gulf Harbour and treating it differently, and that's hugely unfair. And why is that? It's really hard to fathom. It doesn't add up.
Well, you know, talk to Greg Sayers, and it seems that if you're on the outer ring of the city, you're an afterthought. And that's always been the problem. Everything seems to be centric around the CBD, which is old-fashioned thinking. So we need people like you to be raising this and bringing up these, saying, whoa, hang on a second, let's have a look at some alternative solutions. Let's look at some technology. Let's look at these things. Because if we don't, we are going to spend an inordinate amount of money and not actually achieve any solution this side of 10 years.
That's right. That's right. We'll be left behind.
Yeah. And on that note, Wayne, thank you for your time. I think we've covered quite a lot of stuff, including around congestion and transport solutions, and I'll certainly enjoy having you on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for the chat, Cameron, and thank you to your listeners. Well done.
No problem, Wayne. You're welcome anytime. Thanks a lot. Wayne is one of those genuine nice guys, and there's a reason he keeps getting elected. And as you can hear, he has practical solutions for Auckland's transport issues. Let's hope he can get heard around the council table. Tell me your thoughts on what Wayne had to say by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.